Welcome back, everybody. My name's Rachel, and this is my book club. And today is the day for the March wrap-up. Now, March was kind of a slower month for me, but every book I read was a banger. And I was kind of going through a slump this month a little bit, like I wasn't feeling as motivated to read. But even though I feel like I was reading quite a bit slower than usual, every book I read was like 4 or 5 stars for me. Now, I'm still currently reading my last book for this month when I am recording this video, and so I'm just going to talk about the 4 books that I've read up until this point. Every single one of these books really got me emotionally. Like, I was very emotionally invested in every book I read this month, and I'm going to go, I think, in ascending order of emotional feelings in my reading experience. And the first book I want to talk about is Eldest by Christopher Paolini. Now, this will be the 3rd Christopher Paolini book I've ever read. I read Aragon a long time ago, and then last fall I read To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, and then I finally read Eldest in March. I'm not sure what it is that has been taking me so long to read this series, because I read Aragon right after I graduated high school and I really loved it. I had a friend recommend it to me actually while we were on a road trip, and so I read it on that road trip and it was super good and I loved it. And I have had Eldest and Brissinger on my shelf. Like, I've had both of those books for years. Like, I bought them almost immediately after I read Aragon in freaking 2016 or whatever it was, and I just never got to it. I don't know, once I got into college I didn't really read very much, and so I think just the length of these books was really daunting and I just never got around to it. But now that I'm sort of getting into my adult reading, I guess you could say, I finally decided that I should just read this because it's been on my shelf for forever. And then I even read his other book. I read To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, so no judgment, okay? I'm trying my best. So I read Eldest. It is the longest book that I read this month, and this is going at the bottom for my books this month. Again, everything I read this month was so good, and I hate to even say that this is at the bottom because it's not. This book is so good. This series is phenomenal, and after reading now so many pages of Christopher Paolini's writing, his writing is amazing. I really love it. I think his strengths as a writer are definitely in visual descriptors and very much setting the scene, and he's very good at setting the tone. Something I've noticed is a lot of the dialogue in the books I've read is not great. I'm not always overly invested in the characters just because I don't resonate with them very strongly. However, the scene and the environment is set up so well that it almost makes up for it. This is one of the most visually beautiful books I have ever read, and so many pages of this book are just him describing where Aragon is and what he is seeing around him and what the dwarf villages look like and the vistas of the mountains and the sparkling waters and it's crazy. It's so beautiful, and it's really, really impressive to have such an immersive setting, and I loved it. And the plot was still really great. There was good action at the end and a big plot twist that I never saw. That's a lie, I saw it coming, and it was really satisfying to read. I really like this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. There's definitely some things that, again, as far as like character development goes, that are just not my favorite, but I didn't dislike any specific part of this book. I thought it was really good. The twist at the end was really good, and I like where we're finally starting to go as far as Aragon and Roran's personal growth. And so I'm super amped to read the next one, hoping to get to in April, of course, before I forget anything that's happened in this book. So much happened in this book. Yeah, I gave this book 4 stars. It was incredibly beautiful. Christopher Paolini's writing is very unique. This one gets 4 out of 5 stars because it's a great book, but it goes at the bottom of my March tier list just because all the other books I read just gripped me emotionally so well that they just come above this one a little bit. I feel bad putting any of these books below the other because they're all so good. So the next book I'm going to talk about is 6 of Crows. So this is the first Leigh Bardugo book that I have read ever. I've heard a lot about all of her books. In general, I know there's the Shadow and Bone series on Netflix. I did buy the Shadow and Bone trilogy. I just haven't got to it yet. I started with this. I decided to start with 6 of Crows because I read that it was a heist book and that sounded more fun to me right off the bat. So even though I know that Shadow and Bone was first and I should have started with that, whatever, I don't really care. And so I read Six of Crows. This book was really good. This book really took me by surprise for how well written it is. The Shadow and Bone trilogy and the Six of Crows duology are set in the same universe, and they are both YA fantasy series. So I was very much expecting just, a cheesy little magical heist book. And I completely was taken by surprise by how good this is. If you haven't read Six of Crows is a book following essentially a little band of bandits, our little gangsters out of Ketterdam, and they are being hired to complete, this impossible heist. I'm going to read you the inside flap. Ketterdam, a bustling hub of international trade where anything can be had for the right price. And no one knows that better than criminal prodigy Kaz Brecker. Kaz is offered a chance at a deadly heist that could make him rich beyond his wildest dreams. But he can't pull it off alone. Kaz's crew are the only ones who might stand between the world and destruction, if they don't kill each other first. So it sounds very much like a classic, epic, impossible heist with your crew of trusty criminals, right? And that at its core, that is what this story is. But in such a short YA fantasy book, I would have never expected the amount of world building and depth. What really got me about this book is each character has their own philosophies, their own beliefs, their own tragic backstories, their own reasons for wanting to complete the heist. They are each very well fleshed out characters in their own right. They think differently, they act differently. When it comes to certain aspects of the heist, you see their own personal vendettas getting involved, saying, well, we should do it this way because I wouldn't want to harm this person. And then you have Cass, who is like, I don't really care. The characters are so unique and so distinct. It has to be one of the most well-written YA books I've ever read. The storytelling is phenomenal. Each character is incredibly likable in their own way. And even though some of the characters are doing these morally gray or even really violent, just bad things, each character is written so well that you do like them and you do love them, and so you're there to back up the protagonists regardless of what they do. The reason I love this book so much is it just does so much, and I'm really impressed. I have read so many fantasy books, and I have read so many fantasy books that are way longer than this book, and she manages to touch on so many aspects of culture and diversity and pop culture and politics and slavery and crime, and there is so much going on in this book that is not overly flashy. It's not undermined by other things happening. Each aspect of the world that's being built and of the characters she wants you to love is built so well and written in a very specific way where it can all work together. There's these other countries out there who believe this, and there's these other countries out there who believe this, and there's people who are like this, and then there's prejudices against people like this. Like, it is everything I could have ever wanted in a fantasy book. It's exceeded expectations of anything I would have ever thought of a YA fantasy heist book. In all honesty, I gave this book 4 stars, and I have been battling with myself if I should have given it 5, because it's pretty much perfect. Kaz and Inej are just, I love them both, and the story's so good, and I don't know, maybe this is a 5-star read. I'm gonna go 4.5. I'm gonna keep thinking about it. But if you haven't read this book, this is a pretty much flawless book, and I loved it. Another banger for the March reads. Next, I'm going to talk about a super popular book that if you guys can't tell, I'm trying to catch up for all the years of great books that I've missed out on. So my next book is Cersei by Madeline Miller. I had heard a lot of good things about this book and had never really sought it out. I saw a really good deal for this book on Pango Books, so I decided to buy it, and it was so worth it. Everything you've heard about this book is true. That's essentially what I'm here to tell you. And this is another book that really took me by surprise because I never learned any mythology in high school or in college. I just happened to hit a sweet spot in all my English classes where I happened to miss every mythology unit that we ever had. The most experience I have with any sort of Greek mythology is the Disney's Hercules and reading the Odyssey. This is another book that I gave 4 stars, and I think I might give it 5. I'm just scared to give books 5 stars too close after I've read them. I like to let the emotions settle a little bit, but I mean, this book was really good. And something I really adore about this book is it's very much what I understand to be a Greek tragedy, right? I think it very much fits in with the fun, fantastical, epic stories of gods and old Greece and Troy and whatever, right? And it's very epic. It's super amazing. It's very grand. But I think something that really sets this book apart is that it's about Cersei and her growing up to be the woman that she wants to be. And I think being able to mix in these epic Greek stories with her questioning herself and her falling in love and then her being betrayed by men that she trusts and trying to cope with that while also being the daughter of Helios and turning people into monsters. Like, it's such a great mix of her witchcraft and of the Greek gods, while also talking about what it means for her to be able to be the woman that she wants to be. And I think if you are even a tiny microscopic amount interested in Greek mythology or about women in Greek mythology, then this is the perfect book for you. Something that really took me by surprise with this book in particular is that I was expecting it to be epic. I was expecting it to be fun, and I was expecting it to be magical. And I certainly got all of those things, but one thought that crossed my mind a couple times as I started really getting into the story is that idea that representation matters. And I think we can all agree that representation matters. You know, that's obviously been a big topic when they're remaking movies and new books with more progressive themes and so on and so forth. I think that's something we are all pretty familiar with, but I think I was just surprised that I actually really felt that personally reading a book that's normally about male heroes and, you know, it's like the Odyssey, and you're thinking about Icarus and Odysseus, and a lot of times when it comes to Greek mythology, you're always following the male heroes of the time, which is fine. Those stories are great, but I just had a couple moments reading this where I did really feel like, you know, Cersei was the unsung hero of a lot of these stories, and it was really fun to have that perspective instead of the classic perspective that you usually get, and I really like that. But at the end of the day, you should read this. It is really good. I really liked it. Took me by surprise. I might give this book 5 stars. I might make my final rating 5 stars for this book. And the last book that I want to talk about, which is easily the most impactful book I have read in March. I still think about it all the time. I still talk about it to people all the time, even though it is the first book that I read this month, and that is Educated by Tara Westover. Now, normally I love to flash the book when I talk about it, except I did this as an audiobook. I know, my first ever audiobook. And I decided to read that book because I had it randomly suggested to me, right? It was a highly rated book on Audible. And normally I don't pick out memoirs. That's not really a genre I've ever been into. But I decided that, because it's an audiobook, I don't really have to take as much time to commit to it because, I can be doing laundry and making my bed and cleaning my room while I'm listening to it, so it didn't feel as heavy as a commitment as sitting down with the physical book. I got a free trial on Audible, and that was the book that I decided to try out. And oh my goodness, I was blown away. Educated, I think, is going to be one of my top contenders for best book that I have read this year. And I didn't even read it. I think I'm going to get a paper copy just so I can really reread it. It is so good. Educated is one of the few books I've read that I think anyone in the entire world could read and enjoy, because a lot of times, things I like fantasy and sci-fi, like those are not for everybody, and a lot of other books may have certain trigger warnings or just topics that you're not interested in. But I think that Educated is an insane book. It is incredibly amazing. It is humbling and yet empowering and shocking. And I just think there is not a single person on this earth who would not enjoy that book. If you've made it this far into the video, this is your sign. If you need another book to pick up, audiobook, physical book, I don't care, you should read it. It is so good. This book is Tara Westover's memoir following her childhood, growing into adulthood with her very rural, very Mormon family in Idaho. To give you a little synopsis, right? Tara Westover does not receive any education. Her parents do not believe in public school. They don't really homeschool her at all. And they believe in, the honest labor of working in the scrapyard. And her parents are very Mormon. They're very religious. And they are also very heavy conspiracy theorists. They don't believe in the public school system. They don't believe in hospitals or medical care. It's crazy. Like I don't even know how to describe how insane this book is. We are following Tara as she grows up in her family of very religious conspiracy theorist Mormons. She never receives a formal education. She grows up working in the scrapyard, listening to her dad talking about how the government's going to come after them and they should pack an overnight bag for when the FBI inevitably comes, and then they can grab their emergency bags and run off into the mountains. And if you ever look at the cover, it says Tara Westover, PhD. This woman manages to never go to school. She goes straight to college. Don't even ask me how. You have to read the book to find out how she gets into college without ever having been to school before. She makes it into college, and she gets her entire college education, passes all of her classes with flying colors, even though she's never been to school before in her life, and then manages to go on and get her doctorate. And so I had to read this book to find out how this woman ended up with a PhD, and the roller coaster that you will be taken on from beginning to end. It never ends. You get to read almost 3 decades of this woman's life of just nonstop insanity, and it is crazy. And this book is so humbling yet so empowering and amazing. And at this point, I think I'm just rambling on and repeating myself a lot, but I think every single person in the world should read Educated. Hands down, a 5-star book for me. I wish I could encapsulate how that book made me feel without spoiling anything for you. My jaw dropped at multiple points. I cried in this book a little bit, just a little bit. You should just pick up this book and read it or listen to it because it is phenomenal. 5 stars, period. 4 wonderful books. A great month for me, really. Just 4 amazing books that I got to read on my 5th right now. So that's awesome. I'm excited for myself. Thank you for watching. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you like this video and you like this kind of content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you haven't yet, don't forget to add me on Goodreads so I can see what you're reading. And I'll see y'all next time.